This conference will now be recorded.
All right, everyone, thank you for your patience. It is December 5th, 2023, and this is a meeting of the Heber City Council. I want to welcome all of you to our work session. We are late, and we'll see how we can adjust the time as we go forward. And so anything you can do to perhaps speed up your presentations would be greatly appreciated. I'm Mayor Heidi Franco, and I want to welcome our City Council members and all of you. So on the City Council, we have in attendance Rachel Kaler, Mike Johnston, Yvonne Barney, Ryan Stack, and I think online, yes, Scott Phillips. So he's also joining us, as well as our different city staff members. Okay, our first agenda item in the work meeting is the ground lease and parking agreement for the Performing Arts Center. And Matt, you and Phil and Pat are here with the Wasatch Arts Council to present.
Mayor, Council, thank you so very much. We're going to kick this presentation off by having Phil Jordan do a presentation on behalf of WAC, the Wasatch Arts Council. And once he's completed, I'll go ahead and provide a follow-up presentation that looks or dives into the lease agreement terms. Phil?
Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce Pat Sweeney, who's the president of the Wasatch Arts Council.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. As always, thank you, Mayor Franco, for letting us speak today. I'm going to pay attention to your time constraints by saying, we're here again. We've got a theater that we're trying to build. We got a lease. That's it. Okay? We could be done. We have a lot of work that's happened. And what I want to do with Phil is go back to some basics. Work with Matt on letting you know the parameters under which we're working as far as the building and the parking. You've seen this before. You've seen what we had originally started out with as a theater and arts building. We did a lot of thinking. We did a lot of talking to people. We did a lot of listening. And what we heard was, it's too big, it's too much. Can you do something to reduce the size, reduce the cost? We want to make sure that it's full. We did. We have a plan. And the plan is as good, if not better than this one, because we want to showcase everybody. And while we'll have to do a few adjustments, piece of cake. We are a community theater and arts center. We will be a community theater and arts center. That is our goal. And we shall listen to everyone and respond. And that's what we've done. We have the same wonderful view of the Timpanogos Theater. We have a wonderful glass lobby. We have a wonderful patio that we can use for receptions, galas, perhaps put tables and chairs out there for enjoyment of our patrons. So that's something that we're keeping. That was very important to people. The Wasatch Arts Council has a mission, and that's to support the quality of life in the Heber Valley residents with the Performing Arts Center, showcasing local talent and bringing in some touring acts and performers. We want to experience and create opportunities for the Wasatch economy. We also are exploring children's programs because one of our main things is to have children involved from day one and watch them grow into the arts. Oh, I like this. Our vision, as always, remains the same. A memorable experience of quality arts in, as you know, an extraordinary setting that God gave us. So that's where we're going. There is it's going to be a home for artists in the Valley. That's what we were asked to provide. We know Timpanogos Valley Theater. You can see the Children's Choir, which is relatively new to the Wasatch Arts Council, and we're delighted to have them involved. Perhaps a future cowboy poetry. The Utah Collective Arts, Sierra, and the Dance Company has so expanded Midway Art Association, and the Heber Valley Choir.
So the site is, I think, well known in how we've moved from now a year since we saw you last. The master planning has been achieved for what you see in the dark area as the Arts District or the yellow dotted line. And there are now, as we're moving forward, we'll talk about specifically the area that we wish to lease for the building. The amphitheater is a project that we're going to hope to update you on specifically as you get into your January meetings. And we've talked about that with Matt. And Mr. Bradshaw will be there as well. And we'll talk about how that project is moving forward in its genesis. But as we're moving forward in our project of the Arts Center this evening, and what we're doing with the city in terms of the lease is really quite important to us being able to move forward with our fundraising. So all of this, I think if you can see UVUs right there as a waypoint for us. Let's go to the next slide. So as
Robin,
Pat said,
I don't think it's showing on the screen. If you could check that. Please go ahead.
Okay. As Pat said, we have basically moved to a place where we reduced from 2 assembly spaces to 1. And yet we've also held on to the ground for us to be able to build the second one when we have that opportunity with fundraisers moving into the larger project. The venue that we chose to move forward is the smaller of the two in terms of its appurtenances or in terms of the functionality of it, the flag tower, for us to be able to change scenery and move more towards what we call a studio theater form. On the other hand, we have now moved to a place in that studio theater, which was at 200 seats up to 600 seats, so that we actually can do the business that we need to do in the building with the shows that we wish to present. So we're going to wait until we get to the next slide. You can go next.
He is trying to multitask for
I know,
us.
multitasking,
Thank
excellent
you.
job. This is a more of a drilled in view to the ground plan. So Pat, let's talk about the future Performing Arts Center there.
We want to, as Phil mentioned, we reworked the layout that we had. And while we look at the studio theater as the big pink rectangle in the middle, we have set aside the land space for an additional theater, proscenium type theater that would provide more of that framework for the Broadway show or some touring company that comes through that needs that picture. And as the area grows, which it is at leaps and bounds, but as it grows for the future, this can grow for the future. And we did not want to tie anybody's hands behind their back with a program that might not be the best suited right now, but meaning the original one. But this one is comprehensive and can include all of those arts groups that we talked about and more, with all the elements that they need. So there was no reason right now to build the bigger theater and spend money. I mean, it's all about the money and the art that goes with it.
There you go.
Next
Thank
slide.
you, Robin.
We really are multitasking. So as you're about to see, and we're going to go through these slides relatively quickly, we are able to shape shift this space from the large seating area you're seeing in the back is fixed. And then the area in front is front of the stage or near the stage, what we call the house. Let's go to the next slide. You can begin to see we have an upper area as well. So we're going to have 2 levels, a base level and then a level above. And what that does is allow us to feel like we're communing to the stage. We'll actually have people surrounding the art, as it were, as it occurs. And we'll be able to see faces and people across the room rather than just having them all on one side facing the stage. So we have what we essentially now have seen nationally as a movement towards more immersive work where the artists and the audiences begin to actually interact with each other more directly. Let's go to the next slide. This is the content of that. Let's go to the next. So this is going to be a little difficult. Could you scroll down? There we go. So now just in this view, we begin to see how we're going to be able to shift. So let's go to the next slide. And scroll down. Now you can see we can gain more seats, 750, by actually bringing and thrusting the audience, the performer out into the hall and moving seats onto the sides. Let's go to the next slide and scroll down. And now we can actually inject we call bistro setting, where you have table and chairs and a food and beverage experience as well in the theater during the show. Let's go to the next slide and then go down. And then we can actually put bistro on the side as well. So we get a complete surround for, say, comedy or for a music act. Let's go to the next slide and scroll down. And then finally, we can infill it all with a total of 675 with a minor thrust. Let's go to the next. And as well, we actually have a dance floor. We can bring it straight up. So we're going to have the entirety of the whole floor as well as what is thrusted in front of us. Let's go to the next. These are examples of what we would consider to be precedent of venues such as this. And let's keep going down. So it might have a technical look. Let's go to a little further down. But we can see we can have finishes on the sides of the theater that represent a room rather than just a technical space. Just going down. And then we can actually present, you can see along the long side as well. Let's keep going down as we collapse the seats and then keep going down. You can see now we can actually present other live events, fundraising specifically. We're just talking to Dallin about the Chamber's events annually. And or as we can see here for a band being booked into the venue. So let's go down. This is our last slide. We want to leave you with our timeline, basically believing that at this year coming into 23, this moment we're having with you to secure the site is meaningful in terms of our ability to raise funds. Without the ability of representing to a donor that we have control over the property, it's next to impossible to actually raise the money. With that, we're looking forward in 24 for contracting our architect and moving forward with a project manager. And in 25, complete the design, which would take about 13 months to do that all in, and then go to bid. We designed procurement will more likely and needs to be design, bid, build. In this environment, it's actually for Utah, it's really the best way to get the best value for our dollars. And then construction groundbreaking would be in 26, and it's approximately a 20-month build, in opening in the fall of 28. So with that, our piece is done and it goes back to Matt.
Okay.
Thank you, Phil and Pat. Give me just one moment to transition.
Sorry.
I cannot tell you enough how excited we are to move forward with this project. It's been, for me, 7 years.
I was going to say a decade, right?
Sorry, I've only been here 10 years, so it's
Okay.
like been a good chunk of my life. But it has been a labor of love, a labor of excitement, a labor of my love of the arts, and my labor of love with Heber City, because they were so smart to look at us as an opportunity. I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for considering this. It's, we're close, we're close, we're close.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the proposed ground lease and parking agreement. And what I'm going to do is use some of a presentation I gave you in August of 2022 when we negotiated an initial term sheet with the Wasatch Arts Council. I think that context is important because it provides a lot of insight into the terms that are in the proposed ground lease and parking agreement. And so as Pat and Phil have indicated, the proposal is essentially two counterparties, Heber City and Wasatch County Arts Council, have negotiated a ground lease and parking agreement for 4.4 acres of real property located in the Jordanelle Ridge Arts District and PID number 2. The Wasatch Arts Council intends to raise funds to construct an arts center building. This is the building that you saw Phil show you. Supported by Arts District's improvements. This includes roadways, parking, sidewalks, all those types of infrastructure needed to support this type of facility. Those improvements would be funded through a bond issuance via PID number 2. So today we will review the negotiated ground lease and parking agreement on December 19th, 2023. We hope to come back to you for your approval of same agreement. So we're not looking to do it tonight, simply presenting it and seeking your questions on it tonight. Okay?
Uh, Do you have more, Matt?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So quick overview. I'm going to provide you some information regarding the counterparty, Wasatch Arts Council, provide you an update on the Jordanelle Ridge Public Improvement District, better known as PID number 2. I will talk about the enhanced improvements that PID number 2 is obligated to build by virtue of their cooperative agreement with Heber City. Touch briefly upon the term sheet, and then I'm going to review 9 essential terms that are included in the proposed ground lease and parking agreement. So let me run through these very quickly. The counterparty is the Wasatch County Arts Council, led by Pat, who does an amazing job there. It is a Utah nonprofit corporation and IRS 501c3 charitable organization. They were organized back in 2014. As I mentioned, they are the counterparty to the ground lease and parking agreement we'll discuss in just a few moments. The Wasatch Arts Council exists to support and coordinate the efforts of all art organizations committed to Wasatch County as a premier destination for visual and performing arts. As Phil's indicated, they intend to raise a fair amount of money to build the structure. Phil, do you guys have an updated number on that?
So the number that you see there at 60 million is a little bit higher now that we've been able to reduce the footprint and that cost. On the other hand, the cost of building things in this world is more expensive. We're going to be able to come back to you and confirm that number. We believe that number is not significantly less than 60 million, probably in the range of 55, 54 million.
Okay, thank you. Phil's already showed you this picture. This is an artist rendering that we believe the facility was going to look like. They are talking about some change to that to be more reflective of the current environment and market. Moving on to the Jordanelle Ridge, this was a public infrastructure district, acronym PID, that the City Council approved some time ago. 2 bullet points here. The first is the area of the initial district's boundaries include approximately 3,051 developable acres, which encompasses Village 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the Jordanelle Ridge Master Development Plan. As you know, 5 separate PIDs will be established as part of the development, but only PIDs 1 and 2 have been established to date. To reacquaint you, this shows you the 5 villages or the 5 districts, and we're talking about number 2, which is the lighter green towards the bottom of your screen. The Jordanelle Ridge Public Infrastructure District has governing documents and a cooperative agreement that exists between Heber City and the district. And this has been adopted and includes the enhanced improvements, which I'll talk more about in greater detail in just a moment. These are the improvements that will be absolutely necessary for the building to be built and supported. To dive into those enhanced improvements, the art district is 40 acres, and the improvements to those 40 acres includes, as Phil's indicated, a outdoor amphitheater, donated site for the Art Center building. This is the 4.4 acres I mentioned earlier. Public parking and backbone infrastructure, meaning water lines, sewer lines, things of that nature. Major roads to unlock the campus, and adjacent landscaping that will provide for an enhanced park, which will sit adjacent to the outdoor amphitheater. The total enhanced improvement cost was 15.6 million. And again, this is an obligation of the PID through the cooperative agreements the City Council approved several years back. Phil showed you this, but I'm going to show it to you again. The red circle shows you essentially the site of the 4.4 acres. This is where the arts building or facility is going to be built. This is located, for you that may not be familiar with this, this is essentially due northeast of the UVU campus, due northeast of that campus. Council, remember about a year ago, August 22 to be exact, Heber City Council negotiated a term sheet with the Wasatch Arts Council. That term sheet served as the basis for negotiating the final terms included in the proposed ground lease and parking agreement that we're going to dive into here in just a moment.
Matt?
Yes.
Has Jordanelle Ridge already deeded over the 4.4 acres to the city?
They have not. They have not. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So Council, I'm going to share with you 9 essential terms that are included in the ground lease and parking agreement that is in your packet. These are the most salient of the terms I think that you need to be aware of. First, 4.4 acres will be leased to Wasatch Arts Council for development of a community arts building. The leased area is located within the Jordan L. Ridge Development Arts District in PID number 2. Ryan, to go back to your point, we will be required to deed that 4.4 acres over to Wasatch Arts Council within a specific time period, which I'll review here in just a moment. So we've not received it yet, but once we do, there will be a time period by which we've got it deeded over to them. Number 2, the proposed lease term is 50 years with the option for one additional 25-year renewal term, and we may agree upon additional renewals. The term will begin within 60 days following transfer of the property to the city from Jordan L. Ridge Development. So we've essentially got 60 days to make that transfer once it's transferred to us. Number 3, rent is agreed at $1 with no escalation or other adjustments through the term and renewal. City's contribution to the Wasatch Arts Council is determined by a commercial appraisal of fair market value of the lease value. Additionally, city can use rent-free the Arts Center's individual public assembly facilities up to 20 days per calendar year for the length of the term. In other words, we'll have the ability as a city, as an organization, to use those rooms for up to 20 days a year. Public meetings, open houses, things of that nature.
And Matt, that's $1 per year, not $1 for the term.
That's correct. Number 4, the Jordan L. Development LLC will provide for improvements necessary for the Arts Center building. I've already reviewed these, but again, they are the parking, landscaping, parking lot, roads, amphitheater, retaining, grading, power, driveways, sidewalks, water, and sewer. The city will be responsible for long-term maintenance and repair of the improvements.
Matt, what about fiber? Will there be fiber access to the Arts Center?
We are in talks with Mike Bradshaw right now about having a dedicated fiber line to that area, yes.
Okay, but would the PID provide it since we didn't include it here?
We believe that the cable company will provide it and then have agreements with the users to fund it.
Okay.
Number 5 is the Wasatch Arts Council, solely responsible for the design and construction of the Arts Center building. And this is why they're looking to raise the $50 to $60 million to build that structure. The council shall commence construction of the building no later than January 1st, 2029, and shall complete construction within 36 months. Now, please note that the timeline that Phil gave you is far more aggressive than this timeline, so it should be done well within that time period. I also note that if it's not completed by this date, the property shall revert back to the city, and the city will have the opportunity to review the project elevations. Oh, let me back up. So if they don't complete it by then, the property will come back to the city, and we recently negotiated our ability to review the project elevations before they go into construction. Number 6, the Arts District Amphitheater will be constructed adjacent to the Arts Center building. The Wasatch Arts Council will provide a proposal to Heber City for paid services to support design, operations, and programming of that amphitheater. And again, the amphitheater is going to be built by PID District number 2. Down the home stretch, number 7. Number 7 is dealing with a lease agreement and parking agreement. In other words, the ground lease and parking agreement includes by reference a parking agreement that has the following terms in it. First is that the parking will entail 400 stalls. 2, that there be an adequate number of electric vehicle charging stations. 3, that there be a bus drop-off area for 4 buses. That 20 stalls for backup housing parking be made available. And lastly, that the associated improvements will also be included. What we're talking about here is the establishment of a grant, which is essentially the guarantee the Wasatch Art Council is looking for to ensure that they'll have use of the parking facilities, use of the walkways, use of the facilities to support their building. 2 left, number 8, the Jordan L. Ridge Development will be responsible for constructing the Arts District's improvements per the PID governing documents. If for any reason JRD cannot construct the improvements, the lease shall not terminate unless funding, construction, or operation of the Arts Center is made impractical. If the council does not terminate, the party shall negotiate in good faith changes, if any, to the lease. And lastly, the agreement also includes various default and remedy provisions. Default shall exist if any of the following occur: bankruptcy, failure to observe, keep, perform, or cure provisions of the lease, and the city may exercise any remedy available in law or in equity. The next steps: council should approve the ground lease and parking agreement on December 19th. Jordan L. Ridge then transfers the property to Heber City sometime in the near future. Heber City, within 60 days, then transfers that property to the Wasatch Arts Council. Jordan L. Ridge then commences construction on the art district improvements. The Wasatch Arts Council again begins raising funds immediately upon the approval of this agreement. Construction of the Community Arts Center building will commence once they've achieved their fundraising targets. Then, of course, we gather and have an amazing ribbon cutting ceremony to honor this great event. Council, that is the essence of my presentation. Those 9 essential points are what makes up that ground lease and parking agreement. We're here tonight to answer your questions. We have Joshua Jukes, who's the attorney for the Wasatch Arts Council. We also have Jeremy Cook, our attorney, that's available to answer any questions that you may have regarding that agreement.
Okay, so council, you can see the time as well as I, and we still have 2 other items besides this before the regular meeting. I'm wondering if there's any really hot button issues you're concerned about that we could get our guests to answer, or if you have a long list of things, like I have a few items, we can email those to Matt, and he can work with them while over the next couple of weeks. So does anybody have any real hot button issues that you want to talk with them, their attorney, or Matt about? Go ahead, Mike.
I wouldn't call it a hot button, but I think item 3 about the city's use of the facility should be more detailed than 20 days. What parts of it are we to use? Is a day 24 hours? Is that just 20 times? I mean, we're not going to use it for days.
Like, this was something that we originally discussed with Mayor Franco, who brought this forward.
I love it. I just think it should be clarified.
No, I agree. I understand what you're saying. The idea was to have a party there for your workers. You could have a meeting there. So I don't think anybody's looking at 24/7 as a thing, but we can clarify that a bit more.
I think it's a win-win for the city. That's what I think is really important. But if for example, you just mentioned a party. If we have an employee party there for 2 hours, is that one of the days?
That would be considered one of the days under the agreement.
So I think that should be clarified then.
That would
Maybe
take time,
20
though, to
events.
prepare,
That would be 20 events.
That's a good way to look at it.
But an event, you have to have the prep work before the event. You've got to have the cleanup after the event. It can't just be a 2-hour time, right? It needs to be probably a half a day at least, 20 half-day events, or maybe a combination of full-day events. What do you think, Matt?
So the convention in operating these facilities is that you have the building as a day of 24 hours. And in that 24 hours, do all your business within that day. If we are going to then, to your point, say we need 2 load-in days and a load-out day, that would be part of what we call the event. But it's not termed as 20 events. It's 20 days for the impact to us as the Arts Center to then book our building over a period of time. Now, to Pat's point, we can certainly explore what that is or isn't in terms of being able to operate the building. The other constraint that we need to consider is that we have direct costs related to that event. Labor, cleaning. We would engage the use of our ticketing system to control the access to the building as we do legally anyway. So these are what we consider to be costs related to the event. They're not part of this agreement, if you will. There is essentially no rent to be charged for these days of use, and that much like any other user, then you contract with a zero value to the lease of a rent, but then all the other costs would be related to that event would be the city's costs.
Cleaning. You're saying, yeah, so we would still be paying for cleaning.
You'd pay as any other user would pay. There'd just be no rent.
Okay.
And as far as expanding it for one event to become 10 days, that has impact to the Arts Center's ability to do business. So it's agreed at this point that it's 20 days, not 20 events for that reason. And the understanding is that we'll be obviously agreed to under how that worked out. We would envision that there would be a citywide event or celebration, obviously for our Olympic Games coming forward. There would be a lot of other opportunities for us expanding on that, but we needed to broker into the letter of the agreement that this is 20 days.
Thank you. Ryan?
Is my assumption accurate that all the parking contemplated here, the bus drop-off area, that's included in the 4.4 acres?
That is correct.
And then,
Actually, no, it is not.
It is not.
It is the footprint. The 4.4 acres is simply the footprint of the building.
okay.
The parking lot is part of the 40-acre art district, but not part of the 4.4 acres.
We still retain control of the rest of the district. The
Yes.
parking is on our property.
That is correct.
Okay, so those liability issues will be
That
addressed.
is correct.
And actually, the parking is about 600 is currently considered. The
Not the
portion of
400.
400 is actually what would be termed under the parking agreement.
Okay.
But the total understanding we have right now is 600 being built so that we have concurrent events at other facilities in the Arts District.
My only other question here is the reference to an adequate number of EV charging stations. I don't know that I particularly care what that number is, but it seems that it should be fleshed out, whether there's some sort of industry formula of 1 per 20, whatever it is. I think the final agreement should include that, so that way there can be no argument over what adequate number refers to.
I believe we have some city ordinances related to that as well that we comply to.
But remember, we're also looking at growth, and if this opens in 2028, how many more electric vehicles will there be out there? So to anticipate the growth and need the EV stations,
Sure.
you're right on track with that one.
But based on current sales, we could be seeing fewer. I don't know. So, yeah.
That's good.
Thanks.
I just thought you might want to provide written notice at the end of the 50 years within a 6-month period before the 50 years is up. It's just a little addition to that one clause, right? That you would let us know within that 6-month period, or at least by 6 months. So that was one addition. There's an unfinished sentence in clause 14E, if you want to check that one, Matt. And then I'm hopeful we could do a mediation route instead of a trial by jury route if we have issues on this. What do you think? It would be cheaper for both of us.
I don't recall what it says off the top of my head. I thought typically what we do is meet and confer in good faith to try and resolve it amongst
Right.
ourselves. That doesn't work. We go to mediation.
It's not in the agreement. It's just saying including trial by jury, but I was hopeful we could go the mediation route first as all. Okay, thank
You
you.
would definitely want that, Mayor.
Okay, that would be great. And does clause 30, Matt, it says within 60 days, Wasatch Arts Council will submit a written proposal to city by, is it February 2024? Or what, when is that 60-day time period? Is it for next
It
year?
was my understanding, the intent of that was to have, once the lease is executed by the city, then we have 60 days to then come back with a full proposal on operating and programming the amphitheater.
Next year then.
And we carry that as an exclusive right, at which point you can decide to go to bid or not after that.
We need Mr. Bradshaw to make the turnover to you, so you can turn it over to us.
Anyone else? Okay, anything else you're concerned about? Okay, what a great Christmas present to see this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very exciting. And we'll come back then on the action item for December 19th. And if anybody has any other concerns, Scott, did you have any concerns you wanted to say?
No, I'm excited. This is a great addition to our community. Thank you.
Okay, you might want to talk a little louder if you could, please. It sounds like you're good.
All
Okay.
good.
Okay, all right. Then thank you very much. We'll see you hopefully in 2 weeks. And we are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the fiscal year 23-24 budget. We're evaluating funding and police department staffing. So we have our deputy chief and our Chief Nelson and Chief Sever here. And Sarah, I think, is still here. Okay, you let us know when you need to go. I will turn the time over to you, please. Thank you.
That's up to you. I can do it. You just sign there, right?
Yeah.
I'll tee this up if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, Last May, during the budget workshops, you considered a number of staffing positions. Some of those included the police department. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe you approved 2 new positions. Is that right, Jeremy? We had
One.
one new already in the budget. So the impact of the budget was 2 new, and then council said, come back mid-year in the next fiscal year to see what the economy's like, to see if we have the capacity and ability to fund that 3rd position they requested. So today, staff is here to talk to you about that request, both in terms of the need and the financing, and I'll turn the time over to them.
It's up to you. I- All right, I can do that. Okay. Sorry, I have a. So the police department, and this is just for general knowledge for anybody listening, the police department falls under the general fund. The general fund has 2 primary sources of revenue: property tax and sales tax. Property tax is a relatively fixed revenue that goes up with growth, or if we do a truth in taxation. Sales tax is much more volatile, and so new requests kind of intuitively would come from sales tax numbers, because that's where you have flexibility. Historically, we have had 10+% increases year over year for years and years. That has softened. That is actually pretty flat for the fiscal year 24. So the extra capacity in sales tax revenue is not really there for a lot of add-ons. That is that's the punchline from finance. Are there any questions about that?
We are maintaining our 35% reserve fund at this point still.
Yes, we're wrapping up the audit, and yes, we are going to be transferring funds from 23. So there were excess funds from 23, and that's shifting into 24. That's true.
Do you know how much will be shifted?
2.3 million.
2.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be on top of the figures you've just said with the sales and the property tax.
Yes, but those funds are transferred to a capital improvement fund.
I understand.
We generally don't use those funds for operating costs.
But we could if we wanted to, is the point.
I think so.
Yes.
Let me address that. Yes, you could. That's absolutely a policy decision of the council. Recall, though, that you had identified the cemetery admin building as a priority, and we had anticipated a transfer of about 2 million, I think about 2.2 from the general fund over to the capital projects fund in order to pay cash for that project. So that's what that's going to cover, is that project, if that's the direction you still prefer to go.
Wait a minute. Are you saying then that even with the UDOT grant that we received for the cemetery portion of Heritage Farms Parkway, we still have to pay an additional 2 million on top
No,
of
Mayor.
that?
What I'm talking about is the cemetery parks admin building.
Oh, the admin building?
Admin building.
I didn't think we were paying cash for that. I thought we were waiting for the
We were
sales.
going to front the cash, hoping that we would do pre-sales on the niches and eventually recoup all of that. But initially, we'd have to front that money for the project.
I did not know that you had such an aggressive schedule to try to build that.
Yeah, in the budget workshops, we indicated that we would delay its start until essentially January to give us a good look at the sales tax trending, to see what the transfer over from Fund 10 over to Fund 42 would be. And what we've been able to do with the audit is confirm that we'll have a healthy transfer over, and it's that transfer we would use to fund that project.
Okay, so Sarah, you were thinking it would be over 2 million that could be transferred. Matt's talking about 2 million for the cemetery. How many hundreds of thousands over the 2 million do you think would be in the reserves?
We have transferred 2.3 million. That's a fixed
0.3.
number. One thing I should add, though, is there is the added budget cost to this year's budget, and it is a proportion of a full burdened employee. The following year, you will have the full year burden, and then that cost into perpetuity. And since property tax is fixed and sales tax is flexible, you'd have to be confident that you would have the sales tax to cover any operating costs, not just police, but citywide. Um, and we have the operating costs are disproportionately covered by sales tax. So you just want to keep that in mind when you start adding positions, that if you're going to use sales tax and that's flexible, your staff levels will also maybe need to be flexible. If sales tax drops, you might need to consider reducing
Well, it
employees.
sounds like, council, just so we can all be on the same page, it sounds like we've got to choose between a cemetery building being fully funded at cash or whether we want safety with the police. So shall we turn it over to the police then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the needs of the police department. Right now, our population is over 18,000. In 2022, we increased about 9.7%. We did add one additional person at that time, and we continue to grow. If you look at some of our comparison cities around us that have a similar population level, Brigham City has 31 sworn officers, Bluffdale has 43 sworn, Hurricane has 38, and we are currently at 26. And among those, except for I couldn't get the numbers from Brigham City, we had the highest call volume at 11,000 calls, compared to the next was, I believe, Bluffdale at 8,700 calls. So we also have a higher call volume than they do. And even at, hiring, say, if we were to hire somebody in January, it's going to take us a period of time to go through backgrounds and other processes before they ever even come on board. You guys have done a good job with some of the things, like, for instance, the commute time, allowing officers commute time from different areas. Well, that's really great. It also has impacted our staffing levels. There are certain times of the night when there's only one officer on duty. And to me, that's just not an acceptable level. I think they always need that backup officer from Heber, not just from Wasatch County. And currently, how patrol sits right now, we do not have the staffing in patrol to do any additional enhanced services. And I know Wasatch County, because of how busy our detectives are just adding one additional detective. And it'd also be nice if we were to be able to match that. We also have a big issue on traffic. And we do have a traffic detail, and I wouldn't call it a unit. I would call it more of a detail or an assignment. They don't receive really any enhanced training. They don't receive any enhanced vehicles, whereas we would like to put together a traffic unit that can address the traffic issues. That's solely what they're doing. They receive additional training. They're sent to schools to cover for advanced traffic investigation school. And possibly even in the next budget, you might see us request some motorcycles as well during the nice months, where they can get around town better and address some of the issues that we have with UDOT and the major freeway that goes right through the middle of our town. But we cannot do that without additional staffing. So it's really up to council and what you want to do if we want to continue to provide those. But our city's going to continue to grow, and we need to try to stay ahead of it and not behind it. Did you have any questions?
Council, any questions? Go ahead, Yvonne.
So how many of the staff right now are officers that live out of the valley?
The exact number, I am not 100% sure. You might have closer.
It's probably about half. So out of the 26 officers we have, it's probably at least 13.
And what is the usual time? I mean, especially during winter, if there's an emergency or any type of major catastrophe, what are we looking at as far as a arrival time for any of those officers if we need all hands on deck, supposedly?
Up to an hour for some.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mike.
Thanks for coming. It sounds like you're prepping us for a upcoming year. I want to add on to what Yvonne asked. How many of those officers, 13 officers that commute, do you think would want to live here if they could?
Probably, based on my conversations with them, probably all 13. Many of them just expressed that they just couldn't afford to do it here.
Yeah.
Without some kind of a stipend or without some sort of assistance. I mean, I was only able to do it, honestly, if it had not been getting this job here, I would not have lived in Heber. And that's not because, it's just because I had obviously I'd done 21 years in another agency. I have another house that I've lived in for 20 years, so I was able to sell that and put that down. So it makes it a little bit easier for me. But these new officers that are starting out, and we have a very young department with young officers, for them, it's a lot more of a challenge.
Yeah. Well, you're sharing with us, I think, what we already suspect. They'll be coming to our retreat in January, starting sharing some more, and then bringing us recommendations for upcoming budget year, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel.
Well, I know we're not voting. I'm overall supportive of increasing an officer force.
Okay, Ryan.
My question's actually for Sarah. So you said that the transfer has already occurred and it was for 2.3. Is that right? Matt, how much of that do you need safely for the cemetery building?
We won't know exactly until we bid that project in January. The initial estimates that the architect has given us, based upon just calling contractors and subs to get some initial prices, is about 2.25 based on those initial projections.
And I need to just to clarify, just so we're making informed decisions, that transfer is large because of previous highs in sales tax. So if you're going to rely on fund balance surplus, then you're going to rely on sales tax coming in higher than projected year after year. And what we're seeing now is that it's not coming in higher.
Recall what we did in the current year budget is we projected a sales tax that was 1% over last year's actual. And we're running a little bit below that, just a little bit below that. And that is unusual. As Sarah's indicated, we had been running a decade at 10% plus every year for the last 10 years.
Yeah, well, the rolling times have stopped rolling
Indeed.
along, right, with interest rates, inflation, and our citizens are feeling it. We all know that. So, to me, it comes down to the basics, right? We've been wanting to improve the cemetery for a long time. We have a lot of good things coming into Parks and Cemetery, a lot. But it's like I told Heber Light and Power, though they didn't listen to me. We need to be able to afford these new buildings. And paying it out cash is, amazing for any city to do. But, we also have real safety needs, I think, the council needs to consider. Okay, so does anybody else want to say yay or nay? Scott, do you want to come off mute and say anything on this?
Yeah, I definitely support getting our force where it needs to be. I mean, this seems like we're coming back to this every year, and I'd even support, truth in taxation again next year to raise taxes again to help pay for our basic needs. I do think we could look at other financing options for the cemetery building if we're counting on future revenues to help pay for it. My question is, can we take that surplus and start buying some property to do housing where these officers could live in town and have deed restricted housing projects? I mean, we've been talking about it for 2 years, and I'd much rather make a place for the living to live than the dead, in my opinion. But yeah, let's increase the force, as it definitely needs to happen.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I
Yvonne?
was just going to say ditto, Scott, as far as finding the property that we need. I love our plan for going forward with what we've discussed for the cemetery, and I think it's fantastic. But there are things that we really need to take into consideration, and it would be irresponsible for us to ignore how important it is that we take care of the security of our community and of our citizens. I think the one thing from the discussion so far that really concerned me is our comparison to Brigham City, where we have more calls needed than Brigham City does, which makes me a little, looking over my shoulder now as to, how we need to address this. And part of that is definitely going forward. We need to provide our police department with what they need. And if that means bringing an additional workforce, then we need to do it. And then I agree with Scott. I think we need to really maybe reassess our priorities and realize that finding housing is important. And I'm going to share with you just one thought. I had a young lady that used to live in this valley that's friends with our family, and I saw her recently down in the valley. And she shared with me that the reason she moved is because they just could not make it up here. She said with gas prices and everything else, they had to move down into the valley. It's cheaper, she said. And I don't know what you guys are doing up there, basically is what she said, but you need to do something different because people are just getting, she said, I have friends that have also moved out. So going forward, maybe those are things and discussions we should bring into scope
Great
too.
question. So let me respond to that just really quickly. I know we're running out of time. Recall when we annexed the North Village area, we included in those MD&As requirements to provide affordable housing, 10% for each of those projects. I'm in negotiations with Mike Bradshaw right now to take those initial requirements included in his MD&A, which were 80% AMI, see if we can't get those down to 60% AMI or 50% AMI, and see if we can't advance the timeline to get those online. So we've got them. In fact, we're the only organization in this county that has them negotiated, and they're going to be coming. It's just not right now. It's still going to be a little time.
But I think too that we have to take in consideration with the 60% AMI, we're talking at a time when our interest rates were so much lower, and now our interest rates.
No question.
You're looking at, I mean, even dropping now at 60%, lower than 60%, when you're looking at, what is it for a police officer for the beginning pay?
I was wondering.
I mean, that is,
$30 an hour.
but you know.
Is that at 60% AMI?
It was a year ago.
Your
With the
interest.
inflation, it could be at 50 now. We just don't know.
So, I mean, there's
yeah.
so much there that we're now coming into where we really need to consider those things, but definitely we need to get our security.
So essentially the decision tonight, council, is you can either approve this request next Tuesday. We're going to have a budget amendment to capture some other items that we did not anticipate. And what we would do is we include reserves to pay for that half-year cost, or you can include it in the budget process that's going to kick off here in the next few weeks. We present to you the budget workshops, the requests matched up with revenues. It's entirely up to you in terms of how you want to proceed, but both options exist.
Yeah, it's just that if we kick it off, then it won't start till July of next year.
That's correct.
And we were hoping to get one in January to be able to post and get hired. So we haven't heard from Mike. We haven't heard from Mike. What do you think?
I spoke.
Okay, I didn't write you down for whatever reason. So are you favorable, by the way, just for my notes?
Favorable to, what are you asking me to be favorable
Officer
for?
request.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Ryan?
I am as well. I think there's a way to thread the needle here. It'll require some tough decisions by the next council, but I don't think that we have to make the police department go without, and I don't think that we have to walk away from the plans for the cemetery either. So obviously we've got a new chief who's come in, he's taken a look at things and he's saying, hey, you guys need to do this. And I think that's important to listen to. So I'm supportive of moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving forward, December 19th. Is
Okay,
that right?
very good. Can we keep going?
Please.
Let's, Max and team, we're really thankful that you're here today. We're hopeful that we can get through this discussion on the Twin Creeks SSD sewage wheeling fees discussion now. So Russ, there you are. Can you come? Thank you.
Need to make sure everyone's at a microphone so I can hear them, please.
Robin, can you bring up this presentation? This is the shared screen here. I'm not seeing it there as far as where to actually change the presentation. Who's sharing? Is it this computer sharing? Let me just start. Recognizing we're short on time here. So some background, the city, Heber City, Twin Creeks, and Charleston entered into a shared sewer agreement back in 22. Part of the terms of that agreement required that the city move forward with the parties move forward with a wheeling fee study that would calculate the costs of what it costs proportionally to provide that service of wheeling the sewage through Heber City. It includes multiple components. It includes treatment. It includes O&M or operating expenses for Heber City, but it also includes O&M or renewal and replacement fees for the facilities that are being shared. We have completed a draft of that study. We've provided it to Twin Creeks for their review. The draft study includes Twin Creeks paying 100% of their proportionate share to basically replace the shared facilities in the future. They have brought some different options forward at this point that they would like the city to consider with some justification, and I would like them to come forward and present why or the reasoning behind their request at this time, and then we'll have further questions. So Max Covey, Dave Fuller, and Justin Dietrich from Twin Creeks.
All right. Thank you for your time, Mayor and Council, for allowing us, and Matt and Russ for allowing us to be here. We'll be very brief. So first off, I just want to state that we are simply here to present a couple different options. Our goal is to just come up with a fair, equitable way and a method at which we calculate our wheeling through Heber City for the future. So we're not recreating the wheel as we go down the road. One thing I want to make sure we understand here is that and Russ would probably also recommend that we complete updates on the rate studies every 5 years, 4 years, 3 years to ensure that we're covering the O&M budgets for Heber City as that's going to continually increase or fluctuate, not typically decrease anymore. One thing I just want to point out is that we have spent quite a bit of time looking at this. We feel like we're trying to be fair and equitable. We actually noticed there was an error in the Zions study that was in our favor on the treatment. We saw that was I want to say numbers wise, I had them written down, but undercharging us roughly about $100,000 a year. So we would recommend that be changed as well and updated. With that, I'm just going to turn some time over to Justin Dietrich. Justin is our consulting engineer with Bowen & Collins and Associates to provide some information and to kind of walk us through this quickly.
Max, thanks, Council. I'll just cut down my remarks to just the essence. If you have questions, we'll answer them, or if you'd like real numbers or calculations, we can provide them later. So our ask is on one of those three components, which Russ mentioned, the renewal replacement component. We feel that the study overcharges Twin Creeks customers, and essentially we're not opposing that component. That's an important part of the component of the fee. But there's one assumption, one number in there that we feel overcharges Twin Creeks customers, and that is the assumption that all lines in the city that Twin Creeks uses will need to be fully dug up and replaced in such a way that we would need to invest 1.4% of full replacement value every year. So 1.4% of replacement value is not a replacement or an investment amount that's made in any sewer collection system that we know of. Typically, sewer collection systems investment rates are 0.7% of replacement value every year to 1% of replacement value every year, and many are lower. In fact, Twin Creeks is lower, Heber City is lower. Why is that? Well, the reason is that new materials and technologies allow us to stretch pipes longer for less money. For example, cured in place pipe is a big thing now, where you don't have to dig up the road, replace asphalt, or do anything like that, and you can replace it within the pipe by doing a liner that's cured in place. So the industry standard is going towards a smaller recommended replacement value. No one ever met the 1.4% anyways before because it's just really expensive to do. So our ask is just to change that one number to 1% rather than 1.4%, which is still more than probably Heber City customers are investing right now, and more than Twin Creeks customers invest in their own system, but a number which would be adequate to make sure that those are funded. And of course, those would always adjust over time because replacement value will always adjust over time. But that 1% is the methodology we would like to see. So to just wrap up our comments, just to give you perspective of what we're talking about here, is that the study's originally proposed fee to Twin Creeks for service was $331,000. With the change that Max mentioned, the error that we found in Zion's study, that would go up to $439,000. And then with our request to move to 1% of replacement value, that would decrease it down to $397,000, still $66,000 higher than the study. And we think that that is fair and equitable, and that's what we're asking the council to do tonight, is to go with option 2 on your agenda item summary that Russ provided you, which would be a motion to instruct Russ to change that number in this study to 1% of replacement value. And then one last just personal note I'll add is it's not an error that someone put 1.4% in there. That's certainly something that's happened in the past. I myself have included that in calculations in the past. But what we're seeing now is that a more appropriate number would be 1%, and it would still be plenty adequate.
Okay, thank you. Russ, do you want to respond, please?
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments. First thing I want to say is this discussion and coordination has been very cordial. It's not been heated or anything like that. It's just we wanted to provide the information to the council and get your input on this. So just make sure that that's clear. The point that Justin just made about costs going down in the future is a valid point. Again, our costs that we calculated assume complete renewal and removal and replacement of a line in the future. If we don't completely remove and replace that line, Twin Creeks will have paid more if we charge them the full 100% cost that is proposed in the study. If we do something else, line it or do some other method there that costs less, they will have overpaid. So the problem is we don't know what it's going to take in the future. If we say, okay, well, let's only charge 1%, and then we end up removing and replacing it in the future, then the city's going to pay a portion of their share. And it's really a decision on what way we want to go. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing, the other point they've made is the city isn't currently putting money away for renewal and replacement of these facilities in the future. However, over the last 2 years, we've put $4 to $5 million into sewer replacements. And each year we put money in. That's, of course, our big project right now. And so it's not that the city is not putting money into renewal and replacement of existing facilities. It's just that we're not currently setting money aside for future replacement down the road, which we'd like to do. So those are maybe counterpoints, but if you have any questions, you got all of us here to.
Is there any way you can also write on the board what it is we want to charge, because there's different funds compared to what, because they said there was a mistake on one and they would add another 100,000 on that. If
Regarding
you could just write that.
Regarding that, to me, that's a whole separate issue. That needs to be corrected. What this discussion point comes down to is renewal and replacement of lines.
Okay.
Do we want to charge 100%, assuming we're going to completely remove and replace that line in the future, or do we want to reduce that to the proposal is 1%? If you take the 100% cost and you divide it by the life of a pipe of 70 years, it turns out to be 1.4%. What they're saying is, yeah, but you're probably not going to really remove it, replace it. You're going to line it, you're going to do something else, and the full cost isn't going to be that 100%. It's going to be more like 70%. And that's the request is, let's just do 1% per year instead of 1.4. So those are does that make sense? To me, that's the item that we need input from. Everything else is just, we can work through and make sure the numbers are correct.
Does a 1% change with inflation?
Yes, regardless of which direction we go, it's going to change with inflation as we move forward.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
I
Go
have a
ahead, Mike. Okay, Mike, and then you, Scott.
Thank you.
I appreciate the discussion. I do believe that the real life of the pipe's going to be more than 70 years anyway, the pipes we're putting in the ground. And I also think that the city is always going to do what is a good value as we, spend money and invest in our infrastructure. I don't want to be overcharging just to be ultra conservative. And so I am leaning to be, I'd rather be more at the 1 than the 1.4. I think that is realistic in sewer pipes. And I understand both positions here, but I'm tending to agree that we don't really want to overcharge just to be ultra conservative, because I think that is conservative. We're always conservative in engineering anyway.
We try to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely try to be.
Okay,
I still think 1% is conservative, honestly.
go ahead, Scott.
I think the 1% would be a good number, but it also leads to a larger discussion on, we're dealing right now with why we're doing this, because we're paying the brunt of the cost of 70 years of infrastructure where they didn't save for replacement over that 70 years. So I think as far as our agreement with Twin Creeks, we should allow that to be the 1%, but we need to discuss further if we should increase our replacement costs we're charging to residents now so that we have a slush fund in the future. Thank you.
And that's option 2, isn't it? Figure out what Heber City customers are paying, and we would add in our current central Heber project costs to that.
It was option 2, but I think what Scott is saying is, let's move forward with the recommendation here, but then separately, the city needs to figure out what we're going to do for renewal and replacement on our end in the future. And I think that's a bigger discussion for another night. But
that's exactly what I was saying, just so I'm making sure. Yes, that is what I'm saying. Thank you.
So could the idea be that we figure that out before we set the rate with them?
I don't think we need to figure that out to set the rate with them. Then I think it's 2 separate things, but we need to be prudent in how we spend people's money and how we're saving to spend the money in the future. But I think 1% is reasonable, especially if they're talking about technologies and things that we use now for pipes and pipe replacement. But Heber's rates probably do need to increase to prepare for future projects, because we will have infrastructure that needs the same type of stuff done in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. So what we're talking about is Twin Creek's proportionate share of the R&R, not the city's. What I'm going to bring to you in March when we begin talking about the budget is a brand new utility rate analysis that's going to look at the R&R to find out what it should be and what our rate should be to support that. Russ is right. Right now we're spending millions in these infrastructure, and putting R&R aside probably doesn't make sense. But when we're done doing that, it does make sense, because the notion is when those lifespans end, you got sufficient funds in your bank account to pay cash for those replacements. And so we will bring you again a utility rate analysis in March and April to tell you what those rates need to be to cover that R&R for our side of it.
Go ahead, Ryan.
So would Twin Creeks be willing to wait until March and reapproach the council at that time once the study is in hand?
Well, I think that's.
Can I answer that?
City question there.
Yeah, let me answer that.
Increase, and Heber City is the one that's losing the revenue from the increased rates.
We need to get this decided tonight. And the reason being is we negotiated this agreement a year ago.
2 years ago. In fact, there's 2022 fees and 2023 fees that are owed to Heber City. And that's why we're trying to get this done so that we can charge the correct fees. And
so we could do the 2022 and 2023 fees at the 1%, But then going forward into fiscal year 2024, we could do it based on your study.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't, to me, that's not, the study's not relevant. The city is likely not going to fund at even the 1% moving forward. Why do we, if we're, it's just not politically going to be supported at this point. Why are we considering reducing the amount that they're paying? What's going to happen in the future is we're going to make up the difference for what they didn't pay if we do it lower. So to me, they're saying, okay, 1%'s actually probably what this is going to cost at the end of the life cycle. We're willing to pay that. To me, if that's what's supported by the council, let's take that number, move forward, and then our study will be completely separate.
My question for you is, do you believe that 1% is an accurate number, or what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, so and I'll try to make this clear. So if at the end of the life of these pipes, we completely remove and replace them, just pull them out of the ground, put new pipes in, the 1.4% is accurate. It's as close as we can get. If at the end of the lifespan of this pipe, we do something else, we line it, we look at other new technology to extend the life, then it goes down to the 1% or another number we don't exactly know. So they're both accurate. It just depends on what we do in 70 years. And so we don't know that. If at the end of 70 years, so if we say, okay, we're going to charge them 1%, assuming technology is going to get better, or we're going to have another option. If we do that, and we get to the end of 70 years and decide, nah, we got to pull the whole thing out and replace it, Heber City is subsidizing their costs. However, if we charge them 1.4%, assuming that we were going to rip it all out and replace it, and we get to the end of 70 years and we do something else, then they are subsidizing our cost. So they're both accurate costs. It's just dependent upon an unknown, if that makes sense.
I mean, not to sound flippant, but why not just have everybody hedge and we settle on 1.2?
I just wish we'd had this discussion 70 years ago.
Well, that's what I was going to say, Mayor, is we're setting up the people 70 years from now way better than we are right now. So
we'll have something in 70 years is the point. Okay, so he's suggesting 1.2. Does anybody else want to go with this?
I would agree. I'm the person that likes to go in the middle. So for me, I think the 1% sounds great. And I appreciate, first of all, recognizing the error from Zion's Bank and being forthright with us on that. So that's fantastic. But I do understand too that there's so many variables. And I think that's what Russ is trying to get at. We don't know what those variables will be. And to put the brunt of that weight on the citizens and on the Heber City, even if it is 70 years down the future, we need to take those considerations into mind. So I would be wonderful with the 1.2 as well.
If I can just make one point here, this is really important. So in March, I'm going to present to you a utility rate analysis. And we're going to wrestle with the same assumption in terms of what our R&R should be relative to this very same issue. And so you have to ask yourself, are we going to treat them similar to what we're going to treat ourselves? Because the higher you go, the higher the rates are going to have to be to cover that ratio.
The point is what do we do for 22 and 23 until that study's done, Matt?
Well, I'm hoping that you will give the instruction tonight so we can get this finalized and get the agreement executed.
So now what are we going to do is the point, because
Right.
Are we setting up something that's going to last for the entire wheeling agreement term? Or can we set up something that's temporary until your study's done and then we say, okay, we're going to match it, right? Everyone's going to pay the same rate.
In my opinion, we're setting up something that's going to last the entire time of the wheeling agreement, unless when we do those updates, we have better information, then we would adjust and say, okay, no, we're not going to, we may have better information. However, I think what Matt's saying is we may want to be thinking about the same thing. We're going to have to make a decision. To me, that's irrelevant to this discussion, but I think what Matt's saying is we probably want to do something similar with our own as we're moving forward. But I still think tonight what we need is
1.2% for 2022 and 2023. And then in the 2025 budget cycle, we match it to the study starting in July 1st. Are you guys on a calendar year or a fiscal year for your budget? You're on calendar. Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to see how we
that
cut
makes
this,
sense.
cut this
Makes
baby
sense.
in half. Okay, let's try to get to a resolution. So go ahead, Russ.
The study, when we do it, is going to provide the same two options for us. What do we want to assume in 70 years? If we decide, we may decide as a city that that's too much of a rate increase for the residents, but let's at least start. Let's start putting aside 25% or 50%. I wouldn't want to reduce, and keep in mind, I'm a Twin Creeks customer and pay these rates. But as a representative of the city, I want them to pay their fair share. I don't want that burden to be on the city. So whether we're 25%, whether we decide we're going to put in 25% or 100%, to me, that's a different discussion, separate and aside from this discussion.
All right, so you're not willing to give any other recommendation than the full amount, the 100%?
Well, no, I'm saying we need your decision on that. I think in my opinion, the options are 1% assuming lower costs in the future, or 1.4, or in the middle. But regardless of what we do in the future, I think this is a separate decision.
I'd say share the risk at 1.2.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in on this? We've got a 1%, we've got a 1.2. I think you've got a 1.2. Rachel?
I think we should wrap up and start the regular meeting. I mean, we're going to rehash this again in 2 weeks at voting time. It's not a vote night.
No, but they need direction. So right now we're kind of
I'm at 1%.
split. You're at 1.
I think we're disproportionately passing the costs onto county residents and worried about future city and not charging the city. So I think it's disproportionate how we are currently.
Okay, Scott, did you want to weigh in one more time?
I just said I'm still on 1%, and I understand what Russ and Matt are saying, that we as the city, like, do we want to be charging them more than we're going to charge our own residents? And I don't think we're going to charge our residents the full replacement cost. So I'm still sticking
We
at 1%.
haven't seen it. We still haven't seen it yet either. It might be less actually than what we might think. Who knows? We can always hope. All right, you've got 3 right now that say 1%. All right, gentlemen,
Thank you.
we'll continue this. And we appreciate, all of your time and waiting and patience. Everyone, I have to let the city council take a break right now. So city council, if you can come back at 6:35, we'll start the regular meeting.